The Vityaz hummed steadily, a metallic heartbeat in the black of orbit around Lermontov Station. Cosmonaut Anton Petrov ran his hands over the control panels, the familiar grooves of switches and touchpads grounding him in an environment that was otherwise defined by mathematical certainty and vacuum. He had trained for every conceivable contingency, yet there remained a space between prediction and reality where chaos could creep. The mission was labeled routine, a reconnaissance survey of Sirius 9B, a rocky exoplanet cloaked in violet dust storms and flares of unknown radiation. The ship's trajectory had been plotted to the centimeter. Anton checked the orbital vectors again. Delta velocity calculations, gravitational assists, and thruster burn intervals. All aligned. All perfect. Yet as the Vityaz disengaged from the station's tether, a subtle tremor ran through the hull. Not turbulence. Not mechanical. Something else, a fleeting tug at the ship's vector, a deviation smaller than a hair's breadth, but enough to draw Anton's attention. He squinted at the display. Trajectory deviation. Delta theta 0.00047 degrees. He frowned. He triple-checked the star charts and recalculated the orbital insertion. Nothing. The deviation corrected itself almost instantly, as if the ship had passed through a brief, invisible current. That shouldn't happen, he muttered to himself, fingers flying over the console. He initiated a manual override, but the instruments remained stubbornly normal. And then came the first real alarm. A bright pulse, almost imperceptible, streaked across the sensor grid, an arc of energy that seemed to bend space rather than pass through it. It was localized, ephemeral, and unlike anything Anton had encountered. Not a meteor, not a radiation spike, not a gravitational anomaly. The display labeled it unidentified spatial disturbance. He hesitated only a fraction of a second. Curiosity warred with caution, and in the cockpit of the Vityaz, hesitation could be fatal. The ship shuddered violently as the disturbance reasserted itself, this time wrapping around the aft thrusters like invisible hands trying to wrest the craft from its course. Warning sirens flared. Anton slammed his palm onto the thruster stabilization matrix. The ship responded, but with an eerie lag, as if the disturbance had its own weight, its own will. Through the viewport, the black of space seemed to ripple. Anton blinked. There it was, a faint, translucent lattice, almost crystalline, shimmering between the stars. The sensors couldn't identify it. No density, no mass. Yet it moved with purpose, curling around the Vityaz, stretching and folding as if observing, calculating. He tried to maneuver out of it. The Vityaz groaned as the control thrusters flared, but each adjustment was subtly countered. It was as if the lattice, the alien current, was anticipating his moves, testing him, probing him. He engaged the emergency hyperdrive. Time slowed in a cascade of calculations, mental simulations and vector projections. Anton's pulse raced, hand steady but mind operating at near maximum processing speed. The hyperdrive ignited, a flash of cerulean plasma cutting the darkness. The lattice contracted suddenly, and the ship lurched violently. Panels sparked. The oxygen flow alarm beeped. Anton's body slammed into the harness. For a heartbeat, he felt suspended between triumph and annihilation. Then just as abruptly the shuddering ceased. The lattice dissolved into the void, leaving the Vityaz tumbling slightly off course but intact. Anton exhaled, shaking, and ran a diagnostic sweep. Minor power fluctuations, a few overridden circuits, no structural damage. He jotted notes in the log. Unknown subspace lattice interaction. No measurable mass or energy signature beyond subtle gravimetric distortion. Recommend further observation. Anton leaned back, staring through the viewport at the violet glint of Sirius 9B in the distance. He had expected routine. He had expected silence. Instead, he had encountered the first whisper of something intelligent in the void, something that did not communicate with sound or light as humans understood them, but through patterns in space itself. And for the first time in his disciplined, regimented career, Anton felt genuinely, terrifyingly, alone. The Vityaz continued its trajectory, entering the deep stretch of uncharted space. Somewhere ahead, the anomaly waited, patient and inscrutable. The Vityaz drifted deeper into the Sirius sector, its course corrected manually after the encounter with the lattice. Anton Petrov monitored every thruster pulse, every fluctuation in gravity, every microdisturbance in the fabric of space. But even his meticulous calculations could not account for the anomaly ahead. Sensors began to read inconsistently. The subspace scanner, designed to detect gravitational waves and high-energy particle fields, flickered. Readings oscillated wildly, producing maps that were at once precise and nonsensical. Vast corridors of invisible matter twisting like smoke, impossible angles where space seemed to fold onto itself. Not possible, Anton muttered, fingers tracing the erratic lines on the holographic display. He recalibrated the instruments, running simulations of subspace particle densities, vector fields, and localized gravimetric anomalies. Nothing reconciled with reality. Then the communication system blinked out. Earth? Lermontov? Do you copy? His voice echoed in the cockpit, swallowed by the void. No response. Not even static. The usual hum of the Vityaz long-range relay died to silence. The anomaly revealed itself. A dense cloud of subspace particles, shimmering with faint luminescence, drifting like liquid glass. It distorted the stars, bending light in unnatural ways, and made instruments register phantom objects. Asteroids, wreckage, sometimes entire planets where none existed. Anton adjusted the course, but each vector change was met with subtle resistance, as if the cloud were viscous, like swimming through a cosmic jelly. The Vityaz shuddered. Alarms screamed. Thrusters flared. Then movement. Something slid inside the cloud. Not debris, not reflection. A shadow with impossible geometry, tentacles of light that bent in ways forbidden by human physics. Anton froze. The motion was deliberate. Intelligent. Every pulse seemed measured, observing him, testing him. He tried to analyze it. LiDAR scans bounced erratically, capturing fragments of the entity as diffraction patterns, shards of geometry that hinted at something alive yet constructed of subspace energy. The shadow surged toward the ship. Instinctively, Anton fired the Vityaz evasive thrusters. The ship spun in 3 dimensions, thrusters screaming, sensors screaming. Sparks arced along the console. Subspace interference created phantom alarms. Hull breaches that weren't there, radiation surges that never existed. Anton gritted his teeth. He couldn't escape. He couldn't fight it in conventional terms. But the entity was studying him. Adjusting to his maneuvers. Anticipating. Then came the first real collision, not physical but perceptual. The cockpit shimmered. Time warped. Anton's chronometer flickered backward, then forward. For a fraction of a second, he experienced the anomaly not as movement through space, but as a displacement in probability. His actions mirrored simultaneously in multiple outcomes, each slightly different. He slammed his hand on the manual override, forcing the ship to a stable trajectory. The cloud recoiled, retracting slightly, almost as if amused. Instruments whined, cooling systems strained, but the ship held together. Panting, Anton accessed the auxiliary sensors, running complex Fourier transforms to detect the entity in dimensions beyond 3. For the first time he saw it, a lattice of light and shadow that seemed to wrap around subspace itself, forming patterns that suggested cognition, memory, intention. The entity was not made of matter as humans understood it, it was information given shape, an intelligence written in the fabric of space. Earth has no idea what's out here, Anton whispered, recording everything in the log, trying to maintain scientific detachment. He adjusted the trajectory again, careful, deliberate, like threading a needle through invisible currents. The cloud undulated, and for a moment, the entity mirrored his movements almost perfectly. A silent recognition. Then the ship lurched. A surge of subspace energy ripped past the hull, throwing Anton into his harness. Panels flickered, circuits sparked, and a warning blared. Subspace stress threshold approaching critical. The entity seemed to test the Vityaz, probing its limits, pushing boundaries, mapping human resilience. Anton's mind raced. He had training, calculations, contingency protocols, but none could predict an intelligence that existed in dimensions his instruments could barely perceive. He gritted his teeth, overriding autopilot, firing thrusters in a controlled but chaotic pattern. The entity followed, coiling through the cloud like smoke, tracking each movement. Yet then it paused, and for a moment space fell silent. No distortion, no pressure on the hull, no interference. Only the feeling of being observed. Of being understood. Anton exhaled slowly, writing in the log. Encountered autonomous subspace entity. Behavior suggests intelligence. Operates outside physical parameters. Responds to human-initiated maneuvers with pattern recognition. Further study recommended, though risk is extreme. And somewhere in the depths of the cloud, a shadow pulsed, a heartbeat in subspace waiting. The Vityaz drifted onward, deeper into unknown territory, the entity following, patient, silent, and impossible to predict. Weeks passed. Anton Petrov had learned to navigate the subspace cloud with obsessive precision. The anomaly was no longer just a threat. It had become a test, a puzzle wrapped in dimensions his instruments could barely parse. He had grown attuned to the subtle tug of currents, the way light bent around density-less matter, the faint vibrations that seemed almost communicative. Then the sensors blinked. A small craft, emerging from within the cloud. Not a fragment of debris. Not a reflected echo of the anomaly's distortions. A coherent structure, metallic yet smooth, angular but impossible in design, like origami folded in 4 dimensions. Anton froze. It approached the Vityaz slowly with deliberate control. The docking sequence initiated automatically. A soft whirring filled the cockpit as magnetic locks latched. No external commands. No radio signal. The ship had just joined him. The hatch cycled open. A hiss of recycled air sounded familiar, human, but then came the figure. She stepped through the doorway, humanoid, but with subtle dissonances that made Anton's pulse spike. She was female, tall and lean, but her movements were fluid beyond human capability. Joints that bent without strain, fingers that flexed in ways impossible for a normal skeleton. Her hair was dark, yet shimmered faintly with a color his eyes couldn't categorize, a gradient that seemed to pulse in time with the ship's hum. What are you? Anton's voice cracked. He activated the internal scanners. She didn't register as fully human. Subtle energy fluctuations ran beneath her skin, and her body seemed to interface with the ship's systems without physical contact. She smiled, a slight curl of her lips, and spoke in Russian, yet the cadence was wrong, measured, like someone reconstructing a language from fragments. You are Anton Petrov. Your trajectory deviated at 0.00047 degrees during initial departure. Your hyperdrive burn exceeded predicted thresholds by 12.3%. You are compensating for subspace interference from Sirius 9B. Anton's hands froze over the console. How could she know that? He scanned her again. The scanners registered faint energy readings not tied to mass or heat, subspace harmonics embedded in her body. The anomaly itself seemed to resonate in her presence. Before he could react further, the Vityaz shuddered violently. Alarms blared. The anomaly pulsed around them as if aware of the new occupant. I must stabilize, Anton muttered, engaging the thrusters. The ship lurched, fighting against currents that felt alive. But then her hand hovered near the control matrix, and a subtle wave of energy passed from her fingertips into the ship. Thrusters stabilized. Hull tension decreased. She was controlling systems without touching them. You can interface with the ship, Anton said, eyes wide, heart racing. Yes, she said simply. I learned your system patterns from outside. Her gaze was unsettlingly calm, analytical. Your trajectory and calculations are compatible with my vector mapping. A warning light flashed, subspace anomaly destabilizing. The currents grew turbulent, whipping the Vityaz in unpredictable arcs. Anton gritted his teeth, firing thrusters in a desperate ballet. Sparks flew from overloaded panels. The humanoid figure stepped forward, and with a subtle gesture, a field of resonance extended around the ship. The shuddering ceased. The anomaly's currents bent, folding around the vessel without damaging it. Anton stumbled back, heart pounding. The alien presence was not merely surviving, it was manipulating subspace itself. He took a breath. Curiosity battled instinctive fear. You know things no human should know. Who or what are you? He asked. Her eyes, dark but impossibly deep, held something infinite. I am Irina. I emerged here. From the currents. I was waiting. Anton's scientific mind word. Emerged. Waiting. The anomaly had produced intelligence from pure subspace energy. She was not a visitor in the conventional sense, she was a child of the cloud, shaped by physics itself, yet capable of human interaction. The ship groaned again as the anomaly shifted. Irina raised her hand. Do not panic. Test me. Test you. It is aware we are here. And then the first real shock hit, the viewport lit with a pulse of white light. Space itself seemed to stretch and compress. Instruments went haywire. The Vityaz lurched toward the anomaly's center, thrusters screaming. Anton grabbed the manual override. Irina mirrored his motions, subtly guiding the ship in tandem. Together they danced in the subspace currents, human instinct fused with alien cognition. The anomaly pulsed, reacted, and withdrew, leaving the ship intact but hovering on the edge of uncharted territory. Anton exhaled, hands shaking, mind racing. He studied her, the subtle luminescence beneath her skin, the way her presence stabilized the ship, the strange harmonics that seemed to hum in sync with the anomaly itself. Irina tilted her head. You are adaptable. I will stay with you. It is necessary. Anton realized then, the anomaly had produced her, but she was not just a product of physics. She was autonomous, intelligent, and now, inexplicably, his passenger. For the first time, the void felt alive in a way he could not predict. The Vityaz floated in the dim violet haze of the anomaly, systems humming at a low, steady pitch. Anton Petrov had spent days cataloging every anomaly, every fluctuation in the ship's trajectory, but now a more pressing puzzle emerged. Irina herself. She sat cross-legged on the deck, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, or so he thought. Occasionally her fingers twitched, leaving faint ripples in the air that the sensors interpreted as subspace harmonics. She began to speak, not in continuous sentences but in bursts. Russian words laced with unfamiliar intonations, mathematical sequences, and symbols that flickered across the air like projections. Delta velocity, cosine gamma, not linear, she murmured, her voice modulating in patterns Anton could barely parse. Yet each utterance carried meaning. He realized she was describing the ship's movements, the distortion of the anomaly, even fluctuations in subspace particle density, but in a form he could not fully comprehend. Anton's hand shook as he recorded her speech, typing furiously into the logs. He ran simulations to decode the sequences, translating symbols into physical quantities. Irina corrected him mid-calculation. You assume three-dimensional constraints, she said. Her voice was calm, but there was authority in it. The currents exist in 4, and in 4 your vectors are insufficient. He swallowed, checking the instruments. The anomaly's behavior did indeed match her predictions. Currents folding and refolding in ways impossible under human physics. The ship's sensors detected distortions he could not reconcile mathematically. Then the first warning came. Thrusters flared unexpectedly. Panels sparked. The anomaly's currents shifted violently, as if reacting to their calculations. Anton slammed his hand onto the override. Irina's hand hovered near the console. A pulse of energy emanated from her fingertips, stabilizing the ship. She interacts with the anomaly, Anton muttered. Not just through the ship but with the physics itself. Irina opened her eyes. They glowed faintly with shifting light patterns like data streams made visible. I remember fragments. Some sequences are yours, some are mine. Some were never stored. Time is flexible here. Anton frowned. Time is flexible. The anomaly had already distorted the ship's chronometers, but her words suggested a cognition that transcended human temporality. She could perceive events before they occurred, or outside linear sequence, and adapt her actions accordingly. Another surge hit the ship. The anomaly pulsed, massive energy waves rolling across subspace. The Vityaz bucked violently. Anton's harness dug into his shoulders as alarms screamed. He fought the controls, twisting thrusters to counteract the pulse. Irina's voice cut through the chaos, calm and precise. Vector delta, 0.873 radians. Compensate at gamma minus 0.002. Anton followed her directions, astonished. The ship stabilized instantly, almost effortlessly. She had not just predicted the anomaly's motion, she had calculated it in ways he could not replicate, using physics he did not yet understand. He scribbled notes in a log. Patterns emerged. When she spoke, her words, symbols, and gestures formed a matrix of solutions. But there were gaps. Occasionally she paused, seemingly lost. Then she would resuming knowledge as if retrieved from a hidden database. Memory gaps? Anton asked cautiously. She tilted her head. Not gaps. Filters. Some data must remain unstable. Too much continuity collapses the structure. Anton realized she was manipulating information, hers and his, within the anomaly. She was partially emergent from it, but also shaping it, selectively accessing fragments of reality as though she were running simultaneous simulations across multiple dimensions. A sudden tremor shook the Vityaz. The anomaly's currents surged unpredictably. Thrusters overloaded. Panels exploded. Sparks rained across the cockpit. Anton's vision blurred from the strobe of warning lights. Irina rose, stepping toward the center console. She extended her hands. Streams of light flowed from her fingertips, interfacing with ship systems without wires or panels. The thrusters stabilized. Systems normalized. The anomaly's currents bent away, almost as if acknowledging her control. Anton stared, breathless. You're not just a passenger. You're part of this anomaly. Her gaze met his, calm and precise. I am Irina. I speak in fragments of your physics, your language, and in fragments of the currents themselves. We are interdependent. Anton leaned back, a mix of awe and fear coursing through him. The anomaly had produced life, or something like life, from raw subspace energy, and now it communicated, predicted, and acted through a humanoid interface. He understood with a chill certainty that human science had yet to catch up. And somewhere, deep in the shifting currents outside, the entity that had followed him from the cloud watched. Waiting. Testing. Anton's hand hovered over the console. This was no longer a reconnaissance mission. This was the beginning of first contact. An encounter with intelligence that was both human in form and alien in cognition, operating on a level that bent the very rules of reality. The Vityaz pierced Earth's upper atmosphere, streaking against the pale blue of the sky like a shard of distant darkness returning home. Anton Petrov's hands trembled as he guided the ship through re-entry protocols. The anomaly's subspace influence, subtle yet persistent, still hummed faintly in the ship's systems, and Irina remained quiet beside him, her presence calm but unervingly perceptive. When the Vityaz finally touched down at Baikonur Advanced Landing Complex, chaos awaited. Military and civilian space agencies had mobilized in his absence. Media drones hovered at a safe distance, their lenses transmitting the first images of a solo cosmonaut returning with something else. Anton's hatch opened to a swarm of officers, scientists, and security personnel. Questions, accusations, demands, all collided in the recycled air of the landing bay. Stand back. Secure the area, an officer barked. Sensors swept the ship, registering anomalies they could not explain. Irina stepped out of the hatch, moving with deliberate grace, her body almost unervingly stable. The subspace hum radiating from her made nearby instruments flicker. Anton tried to intervene. She is not hostile. She. Silence, a scientist shouted. We don't know what that thing is. Irina's eyes glowed faintly, a pulse of light that caused security scanners to spike erratically. One of the drones faltered and crashed against a wall. A security officer stumbled backward as a subtle wave of energy rippled through the air, knocking instruments slightly off calibration. Anton gritted his teeth. He had to protect her, and the knowledge she carried. She's intelligent. She helped navigate the anomaly. A scientist approached, waving a portable scanner. Intelligence? We can't confirm any DNA. Energy readings are off the charts. This is beyond human comprehension. You need to provide logs immediately. Anton's hands shook as he considered handing over the ship's data. Within those files lay evidence of subspace manipulation, patterns that could alter humanity's understanding of physics, and of life itself. Irina spoke, her voice calm but resonant in the metallic hangar. Earth is unprepared. Understanding must be gradual. Abrupt observation will destabilize the currents. The air shifted. Instruments whined. Security personnel exchanged uneasy glances. A subtle ripple passed through the bay, a distortion in the very space they occupied. Anton realized, with a chill, that her presence alone could affect reality at a level their instruments could not fully measure. A senior officer stepped forward, his face pale. We cannot allow uncontrolled access to whatever this is. You will comply. Logs now. Anton backed away. No. Not until we understand her. You don't comprehend. Suddenly, the anomaly within her flared, a pulse of subspace energy emanating outward. Panels on nearby consoles sparked. Gravity sensors fluctuated briefly. Even the air seemed to vibrate with something unmeasurable. The humans froze, caught between awe and terror. Irina's gaze shifted, calm and unwavering. Do not harm them. Do not destroy. I will stabilize. The pulse faded, leaving the hangar silent except for the hum of recalibrating instruments. Scientists scribbled notes furiously, some whispering theories about intelligence emerging from subspace itself, others debating the ethics of containment. Politicians arrived via secure channels, their voices urgent, demanding control and explanation. Anton felt the weight of impossible decisions. Irina's intelligence, and her connection to the anomaly, was not just alien, it was an entirely new form of cognition. Humanity had never encountered life that existed simultaneously in physical and informational states. If mishandled, the consequences could ripple across Earth and beyond. Yet he also felt fear, not of Irina but of those who would weaponize knowledge they did not understand. He realized he must protect her, even if it meant defying authority. Security advanced. Drones hovered. Anton grabbed a portable control pad from the ship and activated an override to seal the immediate area. The magnetic locks engaged, creating a temporary buffer between Irina and the onlookers. Irina raised her hands, a faint shimmer flowing from her fingertips. The floor beneath them vibrated, and the subspace anomaly within her expanded slightly, bending light and matter subtly. The humans froze again. Anton turned to her, voice low. "We have to leave. Now." She nodded, expression calm but knowing. "They are curious. They will follow. The anomaly senses it. We must move carefully." Anton engaged the Vityaz engines. The hangar doors resisted for a moment, security attempting to intervene, but a subtle field of resonance around the ship, emitted by Irina, allowed them to breach without structural damage. As the Vityaz lifted off into the thin upper atmosphere, Anton realized the truth. Earth had not just witnessed the return of a missing cosmonaut. It had glimpsed the birth of a new kind of intelligence, one that operated outside conventional biology, outside human comprehension, yet intertwined with the very fabric of reality. And the moment Anton looked at Irina, he understood. The anomaly had chosen her, and through her, it had chosen him. The Vityaz hummed in the cold void beyond Earth orbit. Anton Petrov monitored instruments that now flickered with unfamiliar patterns. Irina had remained mostly silent during the transit, yet her presence was constant. A subtle hum of subspace resonance that interacted with every system aboard the ship. Anton had begun to notice patterns in her behavior. Every time a thruster adjustment was needed, she anticipated the correct vector before he even calculated it. Every course correction through the residual subspace distortions of the Sirius sector was guided by an intuition that defied human logic. He ran simulations. She predicted gravitational microanomalies, particle currents, and even minute variations in dark matter density, adjusting the ship's trajectory in ways that conventional physics could not fully explain. "She's not human," he muttered under his breath. "Not in any biological sense we understand. And yet, she's conscious." He accessed the auxiliary sensors, mapping her energy signature. It was neither entirely electromagnetic nor purely subspace, something hybrid. Part synthetic, part emergent intelligence shaped by the anomaly itself. Her body appeared human, but the lattice of information running beneath her skin interacted directly with the ship's systems. Suddenly, a warning blared. "Subspace interference, critical." The ship shuddered violently. A rogue subspace current had intersected their trajectory, a remnant of the Sirius 9b anomaly, or perhaps an echo of Irina's own origin. Anton's hands moved over the manual override. Thrusters flared. The ship pitched violently, hull panels rattling. The anomaly's currents twisted the Vityaz as if the vacuum itself were alive. Irina rose, her hands hovering above the control matrix. A faint lattice of light pulsed along her fingers, cascading into the ship's circuitry. Thrusters stabilized. Hull tension normalized. Anton stared, realization dawning. She could manipulate matter-energy flows at the subspace level. She wasn't merely interfacing with systems, she was interacting with the underlying physics of reality itself. "Every time we navigate these anomalies," he said cautiously, "you anticipate the forces before I even know they exist." "How?" Irina's eyes glowed with shifting patterns. "I am partly composed of what the anomaly produces. Time and causality are flexible here. I perceive probable vectors before they occur. It is not precognition, it is pattern resonance." Anton frowned, taking notes furiously. Pattern resonance. She wasn't predicting the future. She was computing multiple potential outcomes simultaneously, filtering them through a lattice of subspace logic. Then another pulse hit. This one was stronger. Panels sparked, alarms screamed, and the Vityaz lurched dangerously. Anton's heart hammered. He fought the controls, correcting trajectory, but the thrusters were sluggish. Irina extended her hand. Streams of faint energy flowed from her fingertips into the ship. The Vityaz stabilized instantly, but the ambient sensors registered a spike, a brief collapse of localized spacetime. A small, contained rift had opened near the engineering deck, vanishing almost as quickly as it appeared. Anton's mind reeled. She could manipulate spacetime itself, albeit locally and temporarily. He had known anomalies were dangerous, but this was a sentient interaction with the fabric of reality. You're evolving," he whispered almost to himself. You're not just a stowaway. You were created, shaped, adapted, by the anomaly. Irina's expression remained calm, almost contemplative. I am what it allowed. And now what I choose to be. A sudden tremor ran through the ship again. The anomaly's currents outside were shifting violently, responding to some unseen force. Anton's calculations showed a collision course with a rogue microcluster of subspace particles that could tear the hull apart. Brace yourself. Anton shouted, slamming his hands on the controls. Irina raised her hands, emitting a lattice of light into the ship's systems. The currents outside bent, folding around the Vityaz. Instruments went haywire. Sparks flew. For a moment, Anton felt weightless, as though the ship were suspended between reality and some higher dimensional layer. Then the system stabilized. Thrusters hummed normally. Hull stress indicators returned to green. Anton exhaled sharply. You just bent spacetime around the ship to avoid a collision. Yes, Irina said softly. It is necessary. Survival requires adaptation. The anomaly's intelligence interacts with mine. Together we influence outcomes. Anton scribbled in the log. Irina is a hybrid intelligence, partially emergent from subspace anomaly. Capable of manipulating subspace physics and ship systems directly. Likely operates in temporal probabilistic modes beyond human comprehension. Risk of containment unknown. As he looked at her, glowing faintly with a lattice of energy, he realized that the anomaly had not just produced Irina. It had transmitted a form of intelligence designed to interact with matter, probability, and time itself. And he, unwillingly, had become part of that system. The Vityaz sailed onward, deeper into the Sirius sector, carrying a human mind, a hybrid intelligence, and a puzzle that defied every law of physics Anton had ever known. Anton Petrov hunched over the Vityaz data console, eyes bloodshot from days of analysis. He had spent hours parsing the ship's flight logs, sensor readings, and Irina's interactions with the anomaly. What he found disturbed him more than any turbulence or system failure ever could. Time, as recorded by the instruments, was inconsistent. Thruster burns completed before their initiation in some logs, while in others sensor readings lagged behind physical events. He triple-checked the chronometers. The anomaly had warped local spacetime subtly but persistently. Yet the distortions were not uniform. They seemed to respond to Irina's presence, almost as if her cognition itself modulated temporal flow. And then there were her memories. Anton projected a holographic timeline of her statements, recorded behaviors and sensor interactions. Contradictions leapt off the display. She claimed to have observed star clusters before their formation, cited gravitational interactions that would take millions of years to manifest, and described regions of subspace that instruments confirmed did not exist, yet. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. How is this possible? Irina sat nearby, serene, almost meditative. She seemed unaware of his scrutiny, or perhaps she allowed it. You cannot comprehend it entirely, she said, her voice calm but layered with nuance. I perceive sequences you cannot. Time is not singular, it is a lattice. Some paths I observe, some I participate in. Not all are persistent in your reference frame. Anton's pulse quickened. She exists partly outside our timeline. That would explain the inconsistencies, but the implications. Before he could press further, alarms shrieked. The anomaly's currents outside twisted violently. The Vityaz groaned as subspace distortions tore at the hull. Sparks flew from overloaded panels, instruments flared, and the ship lurched violently. Anton grabbed the manual override, fingers flying over thrusters and stabilizers. The currents were unpredictable, defying Newtonian mechanics, bending light and gravity around the ship. Irina rose, her hands extended. Streams of lattice-like energy flowed from her fingertips, interfacing with the ship. The thruster stabilized. Panels ceased sparking. Yet a faint distortion remained in the air, a shimmer of probability that made Anton feel unsteady, as if he were observing multiple versions of the Vityaz simultaneously. You, Anton said, voice strained. You're influencing reality itself. But why? How do you know what will happen? Irina's gaze was distant, eyes glowing with shifting patterns. I do not know all. I observe probabilities. I exist in the currents. Some outcomes are not yours to see. Some are mine. Anton felt a chill. Mine. The anomaly had created her, but now she had agency. She was not just a product of physics, she had will. She could manipulate outcomes that even he could not predict. Another surge hit the ship, stronger this time. The Vityaz pitched wildly. Anton's hands slammed on controls, alarms shrieking, sparks raining across the deck. He realized with a jolt that the anomaly was reacting to him as well as to her, subspace currents bending in response to consciousness, interacting with both mind and matter. "Irina, tell me what's happening," he shouted over the alarms. She stepped closer, calm amid chaos. "You cannot hold linear causality here. Some of my experiences are recorded in potentials, not in history. You will not understand them fully, and you may not survive if you insist on controlling them." Anton's mind raced. He had trained for emergencies, for malfunctions, for hostile encounters, but not for an intelligence capable of bending time and probability, whose memories and experiences defied known physics. He slammed a thruster command, trying to maneuver the ship through a particularly violent surge. The Vityaz groaned, shaking violently. Panels sparked. The lights flickered. Irina's hands glowed, energy streaming into the ship's systems. The currents outside twisted and coiled, bending around them, then abruptly vanished as if withdrawn. Anton collapsed into his seat, panting. You just redirected the anomaly." "Yes," she said quietly. "Partly. It resists me at times. It tests me. And now it tests you." Anton's eyes met hers. For the first time he realized the truth. She was both human in form and alien in cognition, an emergent hybrid shaped by the anomaly, yet capable of independent agency. The shadows in the data were not errors. They were traces of a reality that operated beyond human perception, influenced by her presence. He recorded his observations. Irina's cognition modulates local spacetime, interacts with subspace currents and alters probabilities. Her memory is nonlinear. She perceives potentialities, not just events. Interaction with her is hazardous. Further study recommended, with extreme caution. As the Vityaz drifted into the quieter regions of the anomaly, Anton slumped back, exhausted. He understood something essential and terrifying. The anomaly had created intelligence, but that intelligence was no passive companion. It had its own patterns, its own agency, and its own purposes. And somewhere in the lattice of subspace currents beyond the ship, the anomaly, through Irina, watched, tested, and waited. The Vityaz drifted silently in the void, its hull gleaming faintly under distant starlight. Anton Petrov monitored the sensors, noting every microfluctuation in the subspace currents surrounding them. For weeks, he and Irina had traveled through uncharted sectors, avoiding detection. Until now. Red blips appeared on the radar, Earth's rogue capture fleet. They had declared Irina a potential weapon, a bioengineered anomaly to be contained at all costs. "Anton," Irina said, her voice calm, almost detached. "They cannot comprehend me. They will act predictably. You must decide, evade or confront." Anton's hands trembled over the console. "Evade," he said without hesitation. "We can't let them take you." The fleet accelerated, engines leaving streaks of ionized plasma across the void. Anton calculated the intercept vector. At current speed they would be trapped in 20 minutes. Subspace sensors showed turbulent currents nearby, a leftover distortion from the Sirius 9b anomaly, but these currents were unstable, dangerous, and could tear the Vityaz apart if miscalculated. Irina's eyes glowed. "I can stabilize a corridor. Follow my lead." Anton hesitated for a fraction of a second, then engaged the emergency thrusters. The Vityaz lurched violently as Irina projected a lattice of subspace resonance into the hull. The anomaly within her reshaped the surrounding currents, creating a temporary tunnel of traversable space. Instruments went haywire, readings fluctuating impossibly, yet the ship held together. Pursuers fired. Plasma bolts and micromissiles streaked across space. Anton executed evasive maneuvers, twisting the Vityaz through folds in the lattice corridor. Some shots passed harmlessly through, nullified by the subspace distortion Irina maintained. Others impacted the edges, sending hull panels rattling. Sparks flew. Alarm lights flickered. Anton gritted his teeth. How are you controlling this?" "I am integrated with the anomaly. Its currents respond to me. But it is not entirely under my control. It tests both you and them." Irina's voice was calm, precise. "We must move faster." He engaged the hyperdrive. Calculating a jump through the unstable corridor required mental gymnastics. Vectors folded into four-dimensional space, probability waves overlaid on physical trajectories. He followed Irina's gestures, her hands tracing shapes in the air that glowed faintly with subspace energy. The corridor shuddered. A microcollapse rippled through it, threatening to crush the Vityaz. Anton twisted the ship, firing lateral thrusters to align with Irina's projected path. Hull stress indicators spiked. Panels buckled. Irina's lattice flared brighter. The collapse abetted. Anton exhaled sharply. You saved us, again. Not saved. Deferred. The anomaly will test us continuously, she said. Her gaze met his. And you must understand, my purpose may not align entirely with yours. I exist within its currents. I have agency. Anton's pulse quickened. He realized then that she might be working toward goals he could not perceive, objectives that could conflict with human interests or even his own survival. The rogue fleet adapted. They attempted to match the corridor, but subspace distortions shredded their formations. Micromissiles destabilized mid-flight, engines overloaded and sensors went blind. Anton saw their frustration and knew the anomaly's influence extended even to them, though only through Irina's mediation. Another sector ahead, Irina said, pointing to a faint shimmer beyond the corridor. A region uncharted by humans. We can escape there. Temporarily. Anton engaged the hyperdrive again, following her guidance. The Vityaz surged into the new sector, leaving pursuers behind, though their pursuit would not end. They would follow as long as she remained detectable. In the brief calm that followed, Anton studied Irina. She was luminous, serene, yet there was an edge in her gaze. You said you have agency, he said cautiously. Do I fully know your intentions? She tilted her head. Intention is probabilistic. I will act to preserve both you and myself. Beyond that, the currents have objectives I must consider. They are older, larger, and stranger than Earth. Do not assume I serve only you, or them. Anton nodded, understanding the uncomfortable truth. Irina was not just a companion. She was a hybrid intelligence, evolved from the anomaly, operating in dimensions and timescales he could barely perceive. She was both ally and unknowable entity, her own agenda hidden in folds of subspace logic. The Vityaz continued onward, deeper into uncharted space. Behind them, Earth's rogue fleet faltered at the edge of the subspace corridor, unable to pursue effectively. Ahead lay a void filled with currents, probabilities, and an intelligence older than humanity's history, an intelligence that had shaped Irina, and perhaps intended to shape Anton as well. Anton gripped the console, heart pounding. We survived, for now. But I don't know how much longer we can rely on you, or the anomaly. Irina's lattice pulsed softly, like a heartbeat in subspace. Survival is temporary. Understanding is infinite. Be patient, Anton. Observe. Learn. Decide who you trust, yourself included. And as the Vityaz disappeared into the shifting folds of the uncharted sector, Anton realized that the chase was not merely physical. It was a test of perception, of morality, and of the fragile boundary between human agency and alien intelligence. The Vityaz drifted into the deep void beyond charted sectors, surrounded by a faint luminescence from the subspace currents that Irina now navigated with apparent intimacy. Anton Petrov leaned over the console, recording sensor readings, but his attention was drawn less to instruments than to her movements. She seemed almost to merge with the lattice of light and energy surrounding the ship, her form glowing faintly, resonating with patterns that defied conventional physics. Anton, she said softly, voice tinged with human warmth and something else, an undertone of alien cognition. Do you see what I am doing? He tried to follow her hands as they traced arcs in the empty space above the console. Subspace currents bent, coiling around the Vityaz, stabilizing turbulent flows that would have shredded the hull. The anomaly seemed to respond to her presence, not as a passive medium but as if recognizing its own reflection in her consciousness. You're shaping the anomaly, Anton said, awe-filled and breathless. Not controlling it, but conversing. Yes, she said, a flicker of human hesitation in her gaze. It is a dialogue. Not with words but with resonance, probability, and energy. I am part of it, partially formed by it, partially separate. I am both observer and participant. Anton realized the truth and it shook him. Irina was not born. She did not exist in the traditional sense. Her consciousness had crystallized from the subspace currents, shaped by physics, probability, and patterns too complex for human cognition to fully track. Yet she retained traces of human emotion, memory, and intuition, strands woven into something wholly alien. The ship shuddered violently. A rogue surge of subspace energy struck from a distant fold of the anomaly, threatening to destabilize the Vityaz. Alarms blared. Anton slammed his hands on the console, firing thrusters to counter the sudden force. Hull panels rattled. Sparks erupted from overloaded circuits. Irina's hands rose, glowing with lattice-like patterns. Streams of energy flowed into the ship's systems, stabilizing the thrusters and bending the rogue currents around them. For a moment, Anton glimpsed something impossible. Multiple versions of the Vityaz flickering across the viewport, each slightly displaced in space and time, all stabilized by Irina's resonance. I'm seeing potentialities, Anton said, voice tight. You're interacting with probability itself. Not just the ship, the currents, reality. Irina's eyes glowed brighter. Yes. Probability, space, energy, and consciousness. All are threads. I exist along these threads. I can influence some, observe others. Some threads I cannot touch. Another surge hit, stronger and more chaotic. The ship lurched violently, throwing Anton into his harness. Panels sparked, instruments went haywire, and the subspace currents outside formed turbulent eddies. Irina extended her hands, lattice energy streaming into the ship. The currents bent around them. The thrusters engaged, stabilizing the Vityaz, but the eddies persisted, coiling with intelligence of their own. You feel it too, she said softly, almost contemplatively. The currents are aware of themselves. They test us. They are not hostile but curious, cautious. Like a mind that measures everything it encounters. Anton nodded, understanding dawning with both fear and reverence. The anomaly was not a passive field, it was a consciousness writ large across space, an intelligence that had shaped Irina, tested him, and now coexisted with them both. He asked the question that had haunted him. Do you remember what it was like before? Irina paused. For a moment, her eyes dimmed, the lattice fading slightly. Before is a concept I borrow from you. I remember fragments of human emotion, fear, hope, curiosity. And I remember patterns of energy, flows of subspace, eddies, folds. My experience blends both. I am neither fully human nor fully anomaly. I am both. Or neither. A sudden surge of rogue currents slammed the ship again, stronger than before. The Vityaz trembled, hull stress indicators spiking. Anton's pulse raced. Brace, he shouted, engaging emergency thrusters manually. Irina's lattice flared. Streams of energy intertwined with the ship, stabilizing the thrusters, bending the rogue currents around them like water flowing around a stone. Sparks rained from overloaded consoles, but the Vityaz held together. Anton exhaled, panting. You are the anomaly and you're protecting the ship. Why? She looked at him, expression calm yet enigmatic. Because I am here. Because survival, understanding, and curiosity are threads I carry. You are part of my current now as I am part of it. We move together. Sometimes that requires protection. Sometimes, testing. Anton realized then that he was not just a passenger with her. He was part of a system of consciousness that defied human boundaries, an interface between the anomaly, Irina, and himself. He could understand, observe, and participate, but he could never fully control. The Vityaz sailed onward into the shimmering folds of subspace. Anton watched Irina, luminous and radiant, weaving currents and probabilities with a grace that was impossible yet beautiful. He understood, finally, that their journey was not only through space, but through the unknown architecture of intelligence itself. Human science had reached its limits. And in that realization he felt awe, fear, and something more, hope, fragile and unmeasurable, that he could survive the voyage and comprehend even a fraction of what Irina truly was. The Vityaz entered Earth orbit like a returning comet, its hull faintly glowing from subspace resonance. Anton Petrov's hands rested lightly on the console, but his mind was tense. Irina floated beside him, luminous and calm, a lattice of subspace energy weaving along her form. She was alive in a way no human could fully measure, a consciousness both emergent and hybrid, part of the anomaly yet capable of human-like interaction. Below, the orbital control stations bristled with security, scientists, and media drones. The rogue faction that had chased them now hesitated, unsure how to proceed. For weeks, Anton had recorded unambiguous data. Subspace fluctuations that defied Newtonian physics, causality violations, and patterns of intelligence encoded directly into energy fields. Irina was real, and undeniably conscious. Anton, she said softly, eyes glowing, they will attempt to control me. They do not understand what they confront. Probability favors restraint, but restraint is a human concept. I cannot guarantee outcomes if they force interaction. He swallowed, knowing she spoke truth. The anomaly had shaped her. It had taught her, and through her, tested him. She was not a weapon, but in human hands even evidence could be misused. The Vityaz thrusters flared, maneuvering into the orbital docking bay. Alarms echoed as magnetic locks tried to engage. Sensors detected an approaching squadron of drones armed with containment fields. Anton activated the ship's auxiliary subspace buffers, a lattice Irina had taught him to deploy. Light bent around the hull, scattering detection beams, and one drone collided with another as the field destabilized its guidance. Irina extended her hands. Energy streamed into the docking bay's automated systems, stabilizing the Vityaz descent, while simultaneously disrupting the containment protocols without permanent damage. Sparks flew from consoles, alarms blared, and security personnel scrambled to respond. "Do not harm them," Irina said softly, almost as if speaking to the humans rather than Anton. The subspace lattice around her shimmered. Drone motors overheated. Gravity sensors fluctuated. Even the air itself seemed to ripple with her presence. Anton gritted his teeth. "We can't stay here. But I can't hand you over either." Scientists approached cautiously, their faces a mixture of awe and fear. "Petrov," one said, voice trembling, this is unprecedented. You've brought back intelligence beyond biology. Proof of conscious manipulation of subspace currents." Irina's glow pulsed in response to the words. "Proof exists. Observation is incomplete. Understand this, I am neither weapon nor tool. I am resonance. I am the anomaly in one form made tangible. I am independent." Anton knew the time for decisions had come. Security forces prepared to deploy containment fields. He glanced at Irina. Her energy lattice shifted, almost imperceptibly, forming a subtle barrier around the Vityaz. He could feel the currents reacting, bending space, probability, and perception. He engaged emergency thrusters, spinning the ship away from the docking station in a controlled arc. Drones followed, weapons primed, but Irina's lattice warped space briefly, creating microfolds in the gravitational field. A drone collided with the station, another went off course, and alarms echoed in chaotic chorus. "Anton," Irina said, calm yet resolute, "Earth is not ready for me. But I am not hostile. I can show them, eventually. Only if given time." He nodded, heart heavy. "Then we leave. For now." The Vityaz jumped into an uncharted corridor of subspace, leaving orbiting forces behind. Below them, Earth was tense and divided. Scientists fascinated, governments fearful, and populations uncertain. Irina's existence challenged every assumption of life, intelligence, and the limits of physics. In the quiet of the ship, Anton studied her. "You're both alien and human. A bridge, maybe." She smiled faintly, a flicker of human emotion in a being shaped from currents and probability. "And you are part of the bridge now. Observe, interact, decide. But understand, I do not belong to any system that cannot comprehend me. I am choice." Anton leaned back, exhausted and exhilarated. The Vityaz sailed onward, deeper into the folds of subspace. He realized that Earth and Irina, humans and anomaly-born intelligence, were only beginning to perceive each other. Understanding would take time, patience, and perhaps humility. The stars ahead shimmered with currents unseen, currents that shaped not just space but consciousness itself. And somewhere in those currents, the anomaly watched, alive and inscrutable. Anton exhaled. The journey was not over. It had only begun.